A transit from Saturn opposing your natal Venus represents a profound, sobering, and structurally defining chapter in your relational, financial, and aesthetic life. Occurring roughly every 29 years, this transit serves as a cosmic quality control check on everything you value, love, and attract. While the Sun and Moon govern our core identity and emotional foundations, Venus rules our capacity for connection, our romantic partnerships, our relationship with money, our sense of self-worth, and what brings us pleasure. When transiting Saturn opposes this planet of harmony and desire, it introduces cold reality, boundary testing, and structural pressure to your relational landscape, demanding that you transition from naive infatuation to mature, realistic love. The anatomy of the opposition. To comprehend the weight of this transit, one must look at the stark polarization of the archetypes involved. Venus is the principle of attraction, pleasure, ease, connection, and sweet validation. It seeks to soften boundaries and bring people together. Saturn, conversely, is the principle of separation, discipline, boundary, duty, and time. It is the cosmic reality check. When transiting Saturn moves into a 180°/circ opposition to your natal Venus, it stands directly across from your desires, casting an objective, unyielding light on how you relate to others and value yourself. This tension frequently manifests through external circumstances, such as relationship strain, financial restriction, or feelings of social isolation. You are forced to look at your relational patterns through the uncompromising mirror of the outside world, and the illusions you have held about love are systematically stripped away. The experience of emotional distance and relational drought. One of the most immediate ways a Saturn-Venus opposition manifests is a palpable sense of emotional coolness or distance in relationships. If you are in a partnership, the honeymoon phase, no matter how long it has lasted, abruptly ends. A wall of ice or a mountain of practical duty may seem to rise between you and your partner. This can manifest as physical separation due to work or obligations, or an emotional withdrawal where one or both parties feel unappreciated, lonely, or misunderstood. During this time, the universe effectively turns down the volume on easy romance. Expressions of affection may feel forced or transactional, and disagreements often center around heavy topics like duty, finances, and long-term commitment. For those who are single, this transit can feel like a romantic drought, bringing a heightened sense of isolation or a belief that love is hard to find. However, this deflation of romantic energy is intentional. Saturn is starving your ego's need for superficial validation, forcing you to ask whether your relationships are built on genuine, durable substance or merely the fear of being alone. The crucible of finances and self-worth. Because Venus rules assets, resources, and personal finances alongside relationships, a Saturn opposition will frequently register in your financial life. This is a period of economic belt-tightening and fiscal reality checks. Unexpected expenses, stagnation in income, or a sudden pressure to pay off debts can create a sense of material restriction. Saturn uses this financial pressure to expose your underlying relationship with security and self-worth. Under this transit, your spending habits are rigorously audited. If you have used retail therapy, luxury, or financial extravagance to mask an internal sense of inadequacy, Saturn blocks those outlets. You are forced to decouple your net worth from your self-worth. The restriction teaches you the art of financial discipline, budgeting, and resourcefulness, pushing you to build a tangible, well-organized financial foundation that does not rely on impulsive desires or external approval. Dismantling relational illusions and codependency. We all possess Venusian shadow traits, habits of people-pleasing, settling for breadcrumbs of affection, staying in toxic dynamics out of financial or emotional convenience, or mutating ourselves to be chosen. During Saturn's opposition to Venus, these defense mechanisms stop working entirely. If you have been tolerating a partnership that lacks integrity, respect, or mutual effort, Saturn amplifies the friction until the cracks become structural failures. This process of relational disillusionment can feel heartbreaking, but it is deeply curative. Saturn acts as an uncompromising sieve, separating the temporary infatuations from the enduring alliances. If a relationship breaks under this transit, it is usually because it lacked the foundational strength to survive the reality of time and duty. If a relationship survives, it is because both individuals are willing to do the hard work of renegotiating their boundaries, accepting each other's flaws, and trading romantic fantasy for conscious, mature commitment. The re-evaluation of the aesthetic mind and the mastery of artistry. Beyond relationships and material finances, Venus represents our aesthetic sensibilities, our creative expression, and our capacity to find pleasure in beauty. When transiting Saturn opposes natal Venus, your creative life undergoes a profound structural shift. If you are an artist, writer, or creator, this transit can initially manifest as a daunting creative block or a period of intense self-criticism. The muses seem to vanish, leaving behind only the cold, demanding mechanics of craft. Projects that once flowed effortlessly now require grueling labor, and you may find yourself deeply dissatisfied with your output, viewing your past work as superficial or technically lacking. However, this Saturnian winter is actually an initiation into artistic mastery. Saturn strips away the reliance on fleeting inspiration and demands the cultivation of discipline. It asks, can you create when you don't feel like it? Can you show up for your craft when there is no applause? This opposition forces you to refine your technique, study the structural foundations of your art, and strip away unnecessary ornamentation. You shift from a hobbyist who creates out of emotional overflow to a professional who creates out of dedication and technique. When the transit passes, your aesthetic voice is thoroughly matured, possessed of a timeless, enduring quality that can only be forged through rigorous self-evaluation. The psychology of unworthiness and the retraction of the romantic mirror. Psychologically, a Saturn-Venus opposition exposes the deep-seated architecture of your unworthiness complex. Venus naturally wants to be liked, to harmonize, and to be perceived as attractive. When Saturn opposes this drive, it acts as a psychological shadow, projecting feelings of rejection, ugliness, or unlovability onto the screen of your daily life. You may convince yourself that your friends don't actually care for you, that your partner finds you unattractive, or that you are fundamentally unsuited for romantic happiness. The trap of this transit is to believe these projections and retreat into a bitter, defensive shell. The true work, however, is to recognize that the rejection you feel from the outside world is a mirror of your own self-rejection. Saturn is highlighting the exact areas where you have neglected your own self-respect. If you feel unloved by your partner, Saturn is asking why you are relying on their affection to feel worthy of existence. If you feel excluded from your social circle, Saturn is forcing you to examine where you have compromised your authenticity just to fit in. By retracting these projections, you learn to give yourself the validation you have been desperately begging others to provide. You stop treating the people you love as mirrors designed to cure your insecurity, allowing them instead to just be human beings. The realignment of the social sphere, duty versus pleasure. The opposition aspect inherently brings a structural tension between two opposing areas of life. With Saturn opposing Venus, this tension frequently manifests as a clash between the demands of your public responsibilities, Saturn, and your desire for social pleasure and relaxation, Venus. You may find yourself so burdened by professional workloads, family caretaking duties, or financial obligations that your social life completely evaporates. Even when you do manage to go out, you may feel detached, tired, or unable to truly let your guard down and enjoy the moment. This polarization is Saturn's way of auditing your energetic investments. It forces a boundary between empty socializing and meaningful connection. Under this influence, superficial networking, gossiping, and transactional friendships lose all their appeal. You simply do not have the energy to waste on people who do not feed your soul or respect your time. While it can feel lonely to watch your calendar clear out, this isolation is protective. Saturn is narrowing your social focus so that you can invest your precious emotional energy into connections that possess genuine gravity and longevity. You learn to value quality over quantity, cultivating a tight-knit circle of dependable alliances rather than a vast sea of superficial acquaintances. The maturation of pleasure and the birth of conscious commitment. Ultimately, the heavy, sobering pressure of Saturn opposing Venus is designed to rescue you from the exhausting cycle of short-lived gratification. Venus left to its own devices can become trapped in a loop of seeking the next high, the next romantic spark, or the next luxury purchase, a process that ultimately leaves the soul starved for real substance. Saturn introduces the element of time, duty, and sacrifice into the Venusian equation. It teaches you that true pleasure is not found in the absence of responsibility, but in the fulfillment of it. The deconstruction of people-pleasing and the armor of the word no. At the core of the Venusian archetype is the profound urge to harmonize, to bridge divides, and to ensure that everyone in our immediate environment is comfortable and content. While this makes for a gracious and empathetic disposition, its shadow side manifests as chronic people-pleasing, a coping mechanism where you abandon your own boundaries to maintain an illusion of peace. When transiting Saturn stands in direct opposition to your natal Venus, this specific behavioral pattern faces an existential crisis. The external world suddenly stops cooperating with your efforts to appease it. The more you give, the more is demanded, until the sheer weight of your compliance crushes your spirit. Saturn acts as an uncompromising spiritual boundary enforcer during this transit. It deliberately orchestrates scenarios where you cannot keep everyone happy, forcing you to choose between betraying yourself or disappointing others. This is the painful but necessary birth of the healthy Saturnian no. You are forced to realize that in peace achieved through self-effacement is not harmony at all, it is merely submission. Through the friction of this opposition, you learn to tolerate the discomfort of other people's disapproval. You discover that saying no to a demanding friend, an exploitative employer, or a manipulative partner is the ultimate act of self-love. The transit teaches you to hold your ground with quiet dignity, replacing the fragile, anxious niceness of the past with a solid, respected kindness that is anchored in personal sovereignty. The realities of aging, self-image, and time's unforgiving light. Because Venus governs physical beauty, youthfulness, and the aesthetic allure of the body, a Saturn opposition brings a visceral confrontation with the reality of time and impermanence. Saturn is Kronos, the lord of time, and when it casts its cold gaze upon Venus, it forces you to look in the mirror with absolute, unfiltered honesty. You may become acutely aware of the physical markers of aging, shifts in your vitality, or changes in your appearance that challenge your traditional sense of attractiveness. In a society that equates a person's value with youth and physical perfection, this can trigger a profound crisis of self-image. This somatic confrontation is designed to break your dependency on the superficial aspects of the Venusian archetype. Saturn asks, who are you when your youth fades? What is your worth when you can no longer rely on external charm or physical validation? If your self-esteem has been built entirely on the shifting sands of appearance and social currency, Saturn will temporarily drain your confidence to force a deeper excavation of value. You are being pushed to cultivate an internal beauty, a radiance born of wisdom, character, resilience, and self-possession that is completely immune to the ravages of time. You learn to treat your body not as an ornament to be judged by the collective, but as a sacred, enduring temple that has weathered storms and carried your soul with honor. The integration of the sacred courtesan and the wise elder. In the grand tapestry of your psychological evolution, a Saturn-Venus opposition represents the integration of two seemingly incompatible archetypes, the youthful, desire-driven maiden, Venus, and the wise, disciplined elder, Saturn. Prior to this transit, these two forces may have lived in constant opposition within your psyche, causing you to fluctuate between impulsive, short-sighted romantic choices and cold, defensive emotional shutdowns. The opposition forces these two parts of yourself to finally sit at the negotiation table. Through this alchemical process, your inner Venus learns the value of patience, restraint, and long-term planning from Saturn. You stop chasing immediate gratification and begin to evaluate your desires through the lens of legacy and durability. Meanwhile, your inner Saturn learns to soften its rigid judgments, understanding that pleasure, beauty, and connection are not frivolous distractions, but essential components of a well-structured human life. When the transit completes its cycle, a beautiful synthesis occurs. You emerge as a person who knows exactly how to enjoy the sweetness of life, but possesses the maturity and discernment to protect that sweetness from exploitation. You become the conscious author of your own happiness, fully capable of investing your love and resources into a life that is both profoundly beautiful and structurally unbreakable. Subscribe, like, and share.